To receive updates from our channel, hit the subscribe button. Show your appreciation for this video by liking and sharing it, and don't forget to participate in the comments section. It all began on a typical Wednesday, the kind of day that blends into the backdrop of your existence. I had been married for half a decade, residing in the same old house on a tranquil street in a quiet town. I adored my husband, at least I believed I did, but things had begun to feel different, distant, almost as if I was observing someone else's life. The excitement had vanished from our relationship. We hadn't even argued in months. It was as if we were merely going through the motions. Then Michael entered the picture. He was the new gardener. He had only been working for us for a few weeks, but something about him caught my attention from the moment he set foot in the yard. It wasn't just his physique, tall, strong, muscular. It wasn't just the accent either, the deep Jamaican lilt that made every word sound carefully chosen and gently rolled off his tongue. No, it was the way he looked at me, not like I was just the lady of the house, but as if I was someone worth knowing. It made me feel seen in ways I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't as though I sought him out or even tried to flirt, but it was hard to ignore the electric buzz in the air whenever he was around. It wasn't the usual kind of attraction you'd expect from a woman in a committed marriage. No, this was something more subtle, more dangerous, like a slow burn that I couldn't extinguish. The first time we spoke outside of the usual pleasantries about the garden, it happened in the early evening, just after my husband had left for a work dinner. I had been tending to some small indoor plants, and when I went outside to take a breath of fresh air, Michael was standing there, pruning the bushes by the front steps. His shirt clung to his broad shoulders, and I couldn't help but notice the strength in his arms as he worked. "You have a beautiful garden here," he said, his voice low and warm. "Thank you," I smiled, feeling a little flustered. "It's a lot of work, but it's worth it." Michael paused, wiping his brow. He seemed to notice me a little more than usual, his eyes lingering on mine in a way that made my heart skip. "You're welcome to take a walk with me," he said suddenly, as if it had been on the tip of his tongue for a while. "I mean, the garden's yours, after all." I hadn't expected that. No one had ever asked me to take a walk in my own yard before, especially not someone like him, someone who made me feel a little out of my depth. But his voice was so inviting, so casual, that I found myself nodding before I even realized what I was doing. We walked side by side, the silence stretching between us in a way that was comfortable yet charged with something unspoken. I didn't have to ask why he was here. He wasn't just a gardener. He was something else, something that made me feel alive again. I could sense it in the way his gaze softened when he looked at me, in the way he was always just a little too close. I could smell his cologne mixed with the scent of earth and rain, and every step we took felt like an unfolding moment, leading somewhere I wasn't sure I wanted to go. As we stopped by the small pond in the back of the yard, I couldn't help but feel the tension growing. He leaned against the stone, turning toward me, his eyes never leaving mine. For a second, I thought he might reach out, but he didn't. The quiet hum of the evening was the only sound, the sky turning an orange pink as the sun dipped below the horizon. "So," he began, his voice softer now, "I've been working here for a while, and I noticed you never really get out much. Just wondered if you were happy." I wasn't sure how to respond. The truth felt too raw, too exposed. I had never really thought about it that way. Of course, I was happy. I thought I was. But standing there in the fading light with him looking at me, I realized that maybe I wasn't. I I don't know, I admitted quietly. I guess I thought I was. But lately, I paused, unsure of what I was trying to say. I don't know if I feel like myself anymore. He was quiet for a moment, and then he nodded. Yeah, I get that. Life has a way of doing that to us, doesn't it? I wanted to say something, but the words felt stuck in my throat. Instead, I simply nodded, feeling a strange connection between us, something that made my heart race. I felt it then, more than I ever had before. The tug of something deep inside me, urging me to cross the line, to step into something unfamiliar, something thrilling. But I didn't. Not yet. I told myself it was just a moment, a passing feeling. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just a fleeting thought. Something was changing that night when I went inside and sat alone in the darkened living room. I couldn't stop thinking about him. Michael, the way he made me feel, the way his presence lingered even after he had left. And then I realized this wasn't just about the garden. It never had been. I couldn't stop thinking about that evening. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Michael's face, his gaze, the way his lips had almost curved into a smile when he looked at me, the warmth in his voice that had drawn me in like a magnet. I tried to push it all away, to remind myself that nothing was happening, that I was just caught in a fleeting moment of loneliness. But that didn't make it any easier to ignore the fact that I was craving something more, something I hadn't even realized was missing from my life until Michael walked into it. The next few days, I tried to act normal. My husband was busy with work, and I buried myself in household chores, trying to convince myself that I was in control. But when I heard Michael's deep voice outside the window, my heart would race. There was this pull, this undeniable attraction that I couldn't explain. Every glance, every subtle touch felt charged with unspoken desire. It was on a Tuesday afternoon when things finally crossed the line. My husband had gone away for a couple of days on a business trip, and I had nothing but time on my hands. The house felt empty, too quiet. I wandered aimlessly through the rooms, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was waiting for something, for someone. And then there was a knock on the door. When I opened it, there he was, Michael standing on the porch, a grin on his face, as if he knew exactly what was going through my mind. He looked different today, less like the quiet gardener, more like someone I had come to know in my dreams. He was wearing a simple shirt, but it clung to his broad chest in a way that made me feel self-conscious. And yet, all I wanted was for him to stay. "Hey," he greeted me, his smile warm and inviting. "You doing all right?" I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, just waiting for my husband to come back." Michael stepped a little closer, his presence filling the doorway. The scent of his cologne mixed with the familiar earthy smell of the garden, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. There was something in the air, something that wasn't there before. I could see it in his eyes, the same intensity that had been there that first evening. It was all consuming, like a spark just waiting to ignite. I was thinking, he said, his voice low. Maybe you'd like to join me for a walk again. We can talk a little more, get to know each other better. I should have said no. I should have shut the door, told him that I wasn't interested, but I didn't. I couldn't. His invitation hung in the air like a challenge. I didn't want to resist. All right, I found myself saying, my voice barely a whisper. Just a quick one. I didn't know why I agreed. Maybe I thought it would be harmless. But the moment I stepped outside, I knew that it was no longer just a casual walk. It was something else entirely. Something charged. Michael led the way, his steps confident, his presence overwhelming. We walked toward the edge of the garden, away from the house, and I felt the tension building with every step. I've been thinking about what you said the other night, he said, his voice so close now that it made my skin prickle. About not feeling like yourself. I get that. I see it in you. You're stuck in a life that doesn't fit you anymore. I swallowed hard. His words hit me harder than I expected. It was as if he had seen right through me, cut through the facade I had built around myself. I wanted to deny it, to push him away, but the truth hung in the air, thick and undeniable. I didn't mean to say it like that, I said, trying to hide the vulnerability in my voice. I didn't. He stopped, turning to face me. His hand reached out, brushing against my arm, sending a jolt of electricity through me. You don't have to explain yourself to me, he said softly, his eyes locking onto mine. I'm not here to judge, but I can see it in your eyes. You're not happy. The way he was looking at me, the way his fingers brushed against my skin, it was as if we were no longer just two people talking. It was like a dam had burst, and all the emotions I had been hiding were flooding to the surface. I could feel the heat between us, the closeness, the pull that I had been fighting for days. And then, without thinking, I found myself taking a step closer to him. My heart was racing, my breath shallow. Everything in me screamed to stop, but I couldn't. Before I could process what was happening, Michael's hand moved to my back, pulling me gently toward him. The warmth of his body against mine made my knees weak. His lips were inches from my ear, and I could feel the heat radiating off of him. He wasn't just the gardener anymore. He was something more, something that made every part of me feel alive in ways I hadn't felt in years. He didn't kiss me, not yet, but he was so close that I could taste the tension in the air, could feel the unspoken promise hanging between us. His breath was warm against my skin, and I couldn't stop myself from turning my head just slightly to meet his eyes. You don't have to do this, he whispered, his voice thick with something I couldn't name. But I know you want to. The world seemed to stop. My heart thundered in my chest, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of something that could change everything. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but for the first time in so long, I didn't want to fight it. I didn't want to hold back. And then, just as the space between us narrowed, and I thought I might actually kiss him, I heard the sound of a car pulling up the driveway. It was my husband. The air felt heavier than before, thick with tension, as I crept through the back door of the house, stepping lightly onto the porch, the cool night air biting at my skin. My pulse pounded in my ears, my thoughts racing as I moved quietly toward the back gate. Michael was just outside waiting. I could see him standing by his car, his broad frame almost blending into the darkness, but his presence still somehow commanded the night. I couldn't breathe properly as I took those few steps toward him. I had been so close to breaking before, so close to crossing a line I wasn't sure I could come back from. My mind screamed at me to turn around, go back inside, act like nothing happened. But every inch of me was drawn to him. The pull was undeniable, and just as I thought I could stop it, I felt the heat of his gaze on me. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, his hands in his pockets, waiting for me to make the first move. His eyes locked with mine, dark, intense, waiting. The silence between us grew heavier, and all I could hear was the rhythmic beat of my heart in my chest. I stopped a few feet away from him, standing still, unsure of what to do next. My whole body was on fire, my breath shallow. I could feel the weight of my actions hanging in the air, the decision to either walk away from all of this or to finally let myself fall into the unknown. Michael spoke first, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I thought you weren't coming." I swallowed hard. I wasn't sure. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be doing this. But even as I said the words, I knew they were meaningless. I had already crossed the point of no return. The moment I stepped outside, the moment I left my husband behind in the kitchen, I had already made my choice. Michael took a step closer, and I couldn't help myself. I didn't pull away. Instead, I let him close, watching the way his eyes darkened as he reached out and lightly brushed his fingers across my cheek. His touch was electric, sending a shockwave of desire straight through me. "You don't have to say anything," he murmured, his voice like a low growl that made my knees weak. "You don't have to explain yourself. Just let go." His lips hovered just inches from mine, and for a brief, heart-stopping moment, I thought about pulling away. I thought about the life I had, my husband, my home, my world, and how much I had to lose. But all I could think about was how badly I wanted this. Wanted him. My breath caught in my throat as his lips finally pressed against mine. It was nothing like I expected. His kiss was urgent, demanding, and it set my entire body alight. I found myself returning it, my hands reaching up, gripping his shirt as I pulled him closer. I couldn't think straight. My mind was screaming at me to stop, but my body refused to listen. The longer we kissed, the more the rest of the world seemed to disappear. For a moment, it was just us, just Michael and me, caught in a fire that I wasn't sure how to extinguish. But then, in the back of my mind, the thought of my husband slipped through like a cold reminder. Suddenly, I pulled away, gasping for breath. I could barely look him in the eyes. "I can't. I shouldn't. He's going to—" Before I could finish the sentence, I heard the sound of a door opening inside the house, the unmistakable voice of my husband calling out, "Honey, is everything okay?" I froze, my heart leaping into my throat. My eyes met Michael's in panic, and for the first time since we started this, I could feel the reality of what I was doing hit me full force. I was risking everything. "Shit," I muttered, my voice trembling. Michael's expression was unreadable, his jaw tight as he backed away, his gaze never leaving mine. I had to make a choice, right there. Either I ran back inside, pretending nothing was happening, or I faced the consequences of my actions. I didn't know how long I stood there, caught between two worlds. I was paralyzed by the fear of being caught, but also somehow by the temptation to keep going. My husband's voice called again, louder this time, but I couldn't move. My legs wouldn't cooperate. My mind was a jumble of guilt, desire, and fear. Michael's hand brushed against mine one last time, and I could feel the weight of his touch lingering in the air, like a promise. "I'll be waiting," he said softly, his words almost a challenge. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. And I was left standing there, heart racing, every inch of me alive, with the tension of what could have happened, what might still happen. I turned back toward the house, my thoughts spiraling. The door clicked shut behind me, and I took one last look at the darkened yard where Michael had disappeared. I couldn't help but wonder if this was over, or if the game had only just begun. The door clicked shut behind me with an eerie finality, but the silence that followed felt even more deafening. My chest heaved as I stood there, heart still pounding in my ears, my skin burning from the intensity of what had just happened. Every inch of my body seemed to be vibrating with the energy of what could have been. And yet, here I was, back inside, trying to act like nothing had changed. I couldn't stop shaking. I looked around the room as if I were seeing it for the first time. The ordinary, familiar walls of the house felt foreign to me now, as though everything had shifted and I was no longer part of this world. My mind was still reeling from the kiss, from the promise in Michael's eyes, the touch of his lips, lingering like a ghost on my skin. I wanted to scream, to shout, to make sense of it all, but I couldn't. I had to stay quiet, stay composed. The sound of my husband's footsteps echoed down the hallway, and the reality of the situation crashed down on me like a wave. What was I doing? How had I let it get this far? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself to erase the heat that still burned in my veins. He appeared in the doorway, looking at me with those familiar, concerned eyes. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice calm, but full of something I couldn't place. Was it suspicion? Was he already starting to notice? I forced a smile, though it felt wrong, like a mask I was struggling to hold up. Yeah, just had a lot on my mind. I needed a minute. He didn't seem convinced, but he nodded, stepping closer. His presence, warm and reassuring, should have felt like comfort, but instead it felt suffocating. I could feel the weight of what had just happened with Michael pressing against me, a reminder that everything had changed in the span of a few minutes. My husband reached out, gently brushing my arm as he spoke again. "You've been distant lately. Is everything okay between us?" I felt the urge to pull away from his touch, but I forced myself to stay still. "Everything's fine," I lied, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm just tired." He frowned, clearly not convinced, but he didn't press further. Instead, he gave me a brief, lingering look before heading to the kitchen. I watched him go, my heart racing in my chest. The door to the kitchen slammed open and closed, and I was left standing there alone with my thoughts. What the hell had I gotten myself into? I moved to the living room, sinking into the couch, still reeling from the encounter outside. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I flinched, pulling it out with shaking hands. The screen lit up with a single message from Michael. Are you sure it's over? Or are you still thinking about me? I stared at the message, the words echoing in my mind. The temptation to reply, to make some kind of excuse or confession, was overwhelming, but I couldn't. Not yet. Not with everything still hanging in the balance. The sound of the front door opening brought me back to reality, and I quickly stuffed my phone back into my pocket, standing up just as my husband re-entered the room. He had a weary look on his face, as though he'd been carrying something heavy for days. I couldn't look at him without feeling the weight of my actions crushing down on me. I'm going to bed, I said, my voice flat like I was in a daze. All right, he replied, his tone softer now. Good night. I nodded and turned, walking slowly up the stairs. Every step felt like it took me further away from the person I used to be. My thoughts kept returning to Michael, to that undeniable connection, the fire between us. I couldn't escape it, but as I reached the top of the stairs and made my way toward the bedroom, I stopped dead in my tracks. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and I could see a figure standing in the shadows. My heart skipped a beat as I stared into the darkness, unable to move, unable to breathe. Michael, I whispered, my voice barely audible. The figure stepped forward, and I froze, my breath catching in my throat. But it wasn't Michael. It was my husband. His eyes were cold, searching as though he knew exactly what I had been doing. His lips parted as if to say something, but no words came out. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. You ... My voice faltered, the words caught in my throat. How long have you been standing there? He didn't answer. He just stood there, his gaze never leaving mine, the weight of his silence more terrifying than anything he could have said. I could feel the ground slipping out from under me, and I knew that whatever was about to happen, I couldn't stop it. Now, if you want more real emotional stories like this one, stick around. You might just hear one that hits close to home. Subscribe for more.